The city was alive with the sounds of car horns, footsteps, and the faint chatter of people rushing to their destinations. Among the crowd walked Maya, a young woman whose steps were slower than most. Her shoes were worn, the soles thin from too many miles walked, and her handbag was old but carefully patched. She held it close as if it contained something precious, though inside it carried almost nothing at all. Maya stopped at a quiet corner, beneath the shade of an old tree. She lowered herself onto a wooden bench, its paint faded from years of sun and rain. With a deep breath, she opened her handbag and reached inside. Her fingers brushed against the smooth surface of a $1 bill. She pulled it out and held it gently in her hand, staring at it for a long moment. It was all she had left. Her rent was already overdue by 3 days. The landlord had warned her kindly the first time, but kindness had its limits, and she knew another reminder would not sound so soft. Her phone bill had been ignored for weeks, and her cupboards at home were nearly empty. Even her electricity meter blinked red, reminding her that soon, the lights might go out. But the hardest part was the hunger. Maya's stomach tightened as it reminded her of the skipped meals she had survived on. Yesterday she had eaten only a small piece of bread and a cup of tea. Today, she had nothing. The dollar in her hand could buy her something small to eat, a sandwich, perhaps, or a cup of soup if she found the right place. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to quiet her hunger for a little while. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer under her breath. Just one more chance. Just one good break. The sound of laughter drew her attention. Across the street, children were running after a ball, their faces bright and carefree. For a brief moment, Maya smiled. She remembered her own childhood, when life was simpler and worries were small. Her parents had worked hard to give her everything they could, but life had changed so quickly. After her father's passing and her mother's illness, Maya had been forced to carry burdens heavier than her shoulders were ready for. Now, here she was, sitting on a bench with only $1 to her name. A soft sigh escaped her lips as she folded the dollar carefully and placed it back in her purse. Just then, she noticed someone sitting on the opposite side of the street. It was a man. His clothes were clean, but he looked weary. He wasn't holding out a hand or asking anyone for help, but his eyes gave away his quiet struggle. He looked down at an empty sandwich wrapper on his lap, the paper folded neatly as if he wished he still had the meal inside. Maya's heart softened. She knew that look. She knew what it meant to feel hunger and hide it behind a polite smile. For a moment, she hesitated. That dollar was all she had. It could be her meal. It could keep her standing for another day. But then she thought, if I know this pain, how can I walk away when someone else feels it too? Her decision was made. She stood, walked toward a small deli at the corner, and stepped inside. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat filled the air, making her stomach twist, but she stayed focused. She approached the counter and pointed to the simplest sandwich they had. That will be $1, the man behind the counter said. Maya placed her last dollar on the counter without hesitation. She accepted the sandwich wrapped in white paper and carried it outside. Her hands trembled slightly, not from regret, but from the weight of her choice. She crossed the street and stopped in front of the man. Here, she said softly, offering the sandwich. Please take this. The man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. Are you sure? He asked, his voice calm but filled with disbelief. You don't look like someone who can spare it. Maya smiled faintly. Everyone deserves to eat. For a moment, silence rested between them. The man slowly accepted the sandwich, his hands careful as though he were holding something more valuable than it appeared. His lips curved into a gentle smile, and he whispered, "Thank you." Maya nodded, then stepped back. She didn't wait for more words, nor did she expect anything in return. She simply turned and walked away, her stomach still empty but her heart strangely light. The dollar was gone. The hunger would remain. The bills would still wait for her at home. But for one small moment, she had given someone else a reason to smile. And in that moment, Maya felt richer than she had in a very long time. She didn't know then that this simple act, buying lunch for a stranger with her very last dollar, would be the spark that changed the course of her life forever. The city morning was busy as usual, but to Maya, the world felt quieter. After giving away her last dollar yesterday, she had walked home with no food in her stomach, yet her heart had carried a strange kind of peace. She had nothing left in her purse, but at least she had given someone else a reason to smile. That night, she had fallen asleep with hunger, but not with regret. Her old apartment was dim, the thin curtains letting in the yellow glow of streetlights. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering to herself, "Tomorrow will be better." Now, as the sun rose again, Maya dressed for the day. She had a job interview at a large company. It was not just an interview, it was her only chance to step into something steady. She had applied for many jobs in the past, but most had never even called her back. This one felt different. She had prayed for it. She had dreamed of it. She put on her best blouse, though the fabric was faded from too many washes. Her skirt was plain but neat, and she tied her hair carefully, smoothing it down with her hands. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror and forced a small smile. "You can do this," she whispered. Her stomach growled, reminding her she had not eaten, but she ignored it. She picked up her folder of papers, her resume, her certificates, and the recommendation letter from her last job, which had ended when the shop closed down. She hugged the folder to her chest like it was her shield. Outside, the streets were full of people rushing to work. Maya joined the flow, her steps steady though her shoes pinched her feet. She boarded the bus, found a seat near the window, and watched the city blur past. The buildings grew taller as the bus moved closer to the business district. Her mind kept repeating the answers she had practiced. "Tell us about yourself. Why do you want this job? What skills can you bring?" She whispered them under her breath, hoping she would not stumble when the time came. Finally, the bus stopped near a tall glass building. Maya stepped down, her heart beating fast. The company name shone in silver letters above the doors. She took a deep breath and walked forward. Inside, the lobby was bright and modern. People moved with purpose, holding files, laptops, and coffee cups. Maya felt small among them, but she kept her head high. She approached the receptionist, a friendly woman who gave her a visitor badge and guided her to the elevator. The ride to the top floor felt endless. Her reflection in the elevator doors showed her nervous eyes, but also her determination. When the bell dinged, she stepped out into a quiet hallway. A staff member opened a door and gestured for her to enter the interview room. Maya walked in and froze. At the head of the table sat a man she recognized instantly. His face was the same one she had seen yesterday, sitting on the street with an empty sandwich wrapper in front of him. It was the stranger she had given her last dollar to. Her breath caught in her throat. He was dressed differently now. His suit was sharp, his tie perfectly knotted, and his presence filled the room. He looked nothing like the weary man she had pitied yesterday. Yet there was no mistake, it was him. The other interviewers introduced themselves politely, but Maya barely heard them. Her eyes kept drifting to him. Finally, one of the panelists spoke his name clearly. "This is Mr. Daniel, our new CEO." Her heart skipped a beat. CEO. The man she had fed yesterday was not just a stranger, he was the head of the very company she was hoping to join. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she sat down. She tried to steady her breathing, but her mind raced. Would he remember her? Would he think she had helped him only because she knew who he was? Or worse, would he think she was foolish for giving away her last dollar? She lowered her eyes to her resume, avoiding his gaze. But she could feel his eyes on her. Daniel, the CEO, leaned back in his chair. His expression was calm, but there was a spark of recognition in his eyes. He didn't say anything yet, and the interview began with simple questions from the panel. But every time Maya answered, she could sense that his attention was fixed on her, not just as a candidate, but as someone he had already met in a very different moment. Her palms grew damp. She kept telling herself, just stay calm. Just answer well. This is your chance. Still, deep down, she knew the truth. Her kindness yesterday was no longer a secret between herself and fate. It was sitting across the table, in the form of a CEO who had once been a stranger with an empty stomach. And Maya could only wonder, was this a blessing, or the beginning of something she could not yet understand? Maya sat stiffly in the chair, her folder of papers resting on her lap. She could feel her heart beating so loudly that she worried others might hear it. The room was large, with tall windows that let in warm sunlight. The walls were decorated with framed photographs of past achievements of the company, showing smiling employees and proud moments. Yet Maya's eyes could not stay on the walls. Again and again, they wandered back to the man sitting at the head of the table. Mr. Daniel. The stranger she had helped. The man who was now her judge in this interview. She lowered her gaze quickly, trying to hide her nervousness. One of the interviewers, a woman with neat glasses, smiled kindly and began the questions. Maya, could you tell us a little about yourself? Maya swallowed, then spoke softly but clearly. My name is Maya. I grew up here in the city. I have experience working in customer service, and I've also handled small office tasks like filing, answering calls, and helping with schedules. I am hardworking and I learn quickly. The woman nodded, writing something on her paper. Another interviewer, a man in a blue suit, leaned forward. Why do you want to work here, Maya? Maya looked up just for a second, then lowered her eyes again. Because I want to grow. I want to be part of something bigger. This company is respected, and I believe I can learn here. I want to build a future where I don't just survive, but also give back. Her words came from her heart, and though her voice trembled, her sincerity was clear. The man in the blue suit nodded slowly, impressed by her honesty. But Daniel had not spoken yet. He sat quietly, observing her. His eyes were calm, but there was something thoughtful in them, like he was remembering yesterday, when Maya had offered him her last dollar without hesitation. Finally, he leaned forward. His voice was deep, steady, and carried authority. Maya, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Maya froze for a moment. She had read about this question. She had prepared answers in her mind during the bus ride. But now, sitting across from him, her rehearsed words felt small. Instead, she spoke with truth. In 5 years, I see myself standing on my own feet, not worrying if I can pay rent or buy food. I want to be stable, responsible, and able to help my family. And I want to be proud of the work I do. The room was silent after her answer. It was not the polished response they might have expected, but it was real. Daniel's eyes softened, almost as if her words had touched something inside him. He asked another question, one that the others on the panel had not planned. Maya, yesterday what made you give your last dollar to a stranger? Maya's breath caught. She looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. The other interviewers turned their heads sharply, confused by the question. For a moment, Maya thought about lying, or pretending she did not understand. But she could not. Her honesty had always been her strength, even when it left her vulnerable. She folded her hands together on her lap and spoke gently. Because I know what hunger feels like. I know how hard it is to hide your struggles. When I saw you sitting there, I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone who needed kindness. And I had only $1, but it was enough to give. If I had walked away, I would not have been able to forgive myself. Her voice wavered, but she held her head high. The woman with glasses glanced at Daniel, puzzled by his reaction. He was not smiling, but his eyes were warm. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. Another interviewer cleared his throat and returned to the formal questions. They asked about her skills with computers, her ability to work in a team, and how she handled pressure. Maya answered each one as best she could, her nerves calming little by little. The kindness she had shown yesterday was still in the air, and it gave her a quiet strength. At the end of the interview, the panel thanked her. Maya stood, her knees weak but her spirit steady. She shook their hands one by one. When she reached Daniel, his handshake lingered slightly longer than the others. His eyes met hers, and though he said nothing, there was a promise in his gaze, a promise that yesterday had not been forgotten. As Maya left the room, she stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall for a moment. Her chest rose and fell with deep breaths. She had done it. She had spoken honestly. She had not let fear silence her. But what did it mean that the man she had helped was now the CEO? Would it help her, or would it make things harder? She could not tell. Still, as she walked toward the elevator, Maya felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Maya walked out of the interview room with her folder pressed tightly against her chest. The air in the hallway felt heavy, yet she breathed deeply, trying to calm the storm inside her. The interview was over, but her mind could not stop replaying every detail. The other interviewers had asked her questions that were expected. She had done her best to answer, even though her nerves had made her hands tremble. But what unsettled her most was not the questions, it was the presence of Daniel, the new CEO. Yesterday, he had been just a quiet man on the street, sitting with an empty sandwich wrapper. He had seemed tired, ordinary, and even lonely. She had not thought twice before offering him food with her last dollar. To her, he had been simply a person in need. But today, he was not just anyone. He was sitting at the head of the table, holding power, respected by everyone in the room. His clothes, his voice, and even the way others looked at him carried weight. It felt unreal, almost like a dream she had not prepared to wake into. Maya stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, she whispered to herself, "Why him? Why of all people?" Her heart was caught between fear and hope. Fear that he might think she had helped him for selfish reasons. Hope that he might remember her kindness in a way that could change her future. The elevator reached the lobby, and she walked out slowly. People in neat suits passed her, their shoes clicking against the marble floor. She moved toward the exit, her thoughts tangled. She was not sure if she should smile about what had happened or cry from the weight of it. Outside, the sun was bright. The city carried on as usual, cars rushing, people talking, children laughing. Maya found a small bench near the building and sat down. She needed a moment to think. She remembered the way Daniel had looked at her during the interview. His eyes had not been cold. They had not been the eyes of someone who judged her. They had been searching, thoughtful, as if he wanted to understand her better. And when he had asked that question about why she gave her last dollar, it had felt personal, not professional. Does he really remember me? She wondered aloud. She thought back to yesterday. She had given him the sandwich without waiting for thanks. She had walked away because she had not expected anything in return. If she had known he was the CEO of such a big company, would she still have acted the same way? Maya wanted to believe yes. She wanted to believe her kindness was true, not tied to who he was. But still, doubt whispered in her ear. What if he thought she had done it because she had known? What if he believed she was pretending to be generous only to impress him? Maya closed her eyes, shaking her head. No, she whispered to herself. The truth is enough. At that very moment, on the top floor of the building, Daniel sat in the interview room, watching the door through which Maya had left. The panelists were discussing her answers, comparing her to other candidates. Some said she lacked polish. Others said her honesty was refreshing. But Daniel was silent. His mind was elsewhere. He remembered clearly the moment on the street. He had been tired, not because he lacked money, but because he had wanted to see the city from a different side. He had left his office early that day, wanting to walk without drivers or assistants, to breathe without schedules. He had bought a sandwich, but given most of it to a stray dog. Sitting there with the empty wrapper, he had felt strangely invisible. And then Maya had appeared. A young woman with tired eyes, yet with a smile that carried light. She had offered him food she could not afford to give. He had seen her purse. He had noticed the way she hesitated before walking into the deli. It had not been easy for her. Yet she had given. Now, as CEO, he saw her again, honest, nervous, but strong. And he wondered, how many people would still choose kindness when they had nothing left. The meeting ended, and Daniel stood. He did not share his full thoughts with the panel. He only said, "She is someone we should consider carefully." Back outside, Maya rose from the bench, feeling the weight of the day. She still had no money in her purse, and no promise that she had the job. But her steps were lighter as she walked away from the tall building. Something had changed. She could not explain it, but she felt it in her heart. The stranger she had helped was no longer a stranger, and somehow, she knew their paths were not finished crossing. For the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to smile, faint but real. She whispered, "Maybe tomorrow will be brighter." And though she did not see it, from the top floor window, Daniel stood looking down at the street, watching her leave, his expression thoughtful. The following morning, Maya woke up earlier than usual. Her small apartment was cold, and the faint sound of traffic outside reminded her the city never rested. She sat on the edge of her bed, hugging her knees for a moment before standing up. The interview was over, but its memory filled her mind. She had spoken honestly. She had not hidden her struggles. And most of all, she had faced the man she never thought she would see again, the stranger she had helped. Mr. Daniel. The thought of him made her heart race. She wondered if he truly remembered her, or if yesterday was just a blur in his busy life. Maybe to him, she was only another candidate in a long list of interviews. Maybe her act of kindness was small compared to everything else he had seen in his life. But deep down, something told her it was not forgotten. She tried not to think too much as she prepared herself. With no work and no money, her day was empty. She cleaned her apartment, folded her few clothes, and sat by the window with a cup of plain water. Hunger whispered again, but she ignored it. Meanwhile, in the tall glass building, Daniel was already at work. His office overlooked the city, but he was not looking at the view. Instead, he was reading through the files of candidates who had been interviewed yesterday. When his eyes fell on Maya's file, he paused. Her resume was simple, not filled with high degrees or shining experiences. Yet, her honesty had left a mark. He remembered how her voice trembled yet carried truth. And he remembered how she had spoken of giving back even when she had nothing. For a long moment, Daniel leaned back in his chair. He thought about the life of leaders, how often they were surrounded by people who smiled only to gain something, who offered words that were polished but empty. And then there was Maya, sincere, brave, and unexpectedly generous. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. His assistant entered with a folder of reports. "The panel has made their short list for the new position," she said. Daniel nodded, opening the folder. Names filled the page, but his eyes quickly found hers. Maya's name was not at the top. Some of the panelists had marked her as too inexperienced. Others had noted honest but lacks confidence. Daniel closed the folder slowly. He could not ignore what he had seen in her. He could not forget that sandwich she had offered with trembling hands. Later that day, a meeting was held to finalize the selection. The panel sat around the table once again, this time without candidates. They discussed skills, experience, and polished answers. One of the panelists said, "Maya is kind, yes, but kindness does not fill the requirements of the job." Daniel spoke for the first time with firm calmness. Sometimes, kindness is the most important skill. Technical things can be learned. But true character cannot be taught so easily. The room fell quiet. The panelists exchanged glances, uncertain. They were used to leaders who cared only for results, not for values. Daniel leaned forward. "Do you know what Maya did before the interview? She gave her last dollar to feed a stranger. That stranger was me." Gasps filled the room. The panelists stared at him in shock. One whispered, "You?" "Yes," Daniel said simply. "I saw her with nothing, yet she still chose to give. That kind of heart is rare. If we are building a company for the future, we need people who see beyond themselves." No one argued after that. His words carried weight, not only because he was CEO, but because his conviction was clear. By the end of the meeting, Maya's name was placed firmly on the final list. That evening, as Maya sat by her window again, she heard a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find a delivery man holding an envelope. Confused, she accepted it and closed the door. Inside the envelope was a letter on the company's official paper. Her hands shook as she read the words, "Dear Maya, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the position. Please report to the company on Monday morning at 9 a.m. to begin your journey with us. Sincerely, Human Resources Department." Maya pressed the letter to her chest, tears filling her eyes. She had been chosen. She had been seen. She sat back on her bed, her heart overflowing with relief and joy. For so long, life had been heavy with rejection and hunger. But now, a new door had opened. Far away in his office, Daniel closed his laptop and stood by the window, watching the city lights. He smiled faintly, knowing he had made the right choice. For him, it was not just about hiring an employee. It was about recognizing something greater, the quiet power of kindness. And for Maya, it was the beginning of a new chapter, though she still did not know how deeply her life was about to change. Maya woke early on Monday, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared for her first day at the company. Her small apartment smelled faintly of soap and bread she had managed to save for breakfast. She dressed carefully in the same blouse and skirt she had worn for the interview, wanting to look neat and professional. Her nerves buzzed in her stomach, but she also felt a spark of excitement she had not experienced in years. She stepped onto the city streets, sunlight reflecting off the tall buildings, and took a deep breath. Today was the first step into something bigger than she had ever imagined. She clutched her folder of documents just in case, though she knew she would not need them. Her heart was full of hope, and for the first time, she truly believed in the possibilities ahead. When she arrived at the company, the receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Maya. Mr. Daniel will see you shortly." Maya nodded, walking toward the large glass doors that led to the CEO's office. She had seen him from a distance during the interview, but now she would meet him face to face as her superior. The thought made her pulse quicken. Daniel stood as she entered, his presence calm but commanding. "Welcome, Maya," he said. "I hope you are ready for your first day." "I am," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He smiled faintly. "Good. I want to start with something a little different today. Before assigning your usual tasks, I want to see who you really are, not just what you can do on paper." Maya tilted her head, confused but intrigued. "What do you mean?" Daniel gestured toward the window, where a small park could be seen below. "I want you to go down there and help someone. Observe how they react and report back to me. The goal is not the task itself but how you approach it. How you treat others under unusual circumstances. This will tell me a lot about your character and decision-making." Maya's eyebrows rose in surprise. She had expected schedules, emails, or maybe filing work, but not this. Yet she remembered how she had helped him with her last dollar and felt a strange sense of calm. She nodded. "I understand." Daniel handed her a small envelope. "Everything you need is inside. Take your time and be sincere." Maya opened the envelope and found a small note and 2 vouchers for lunch at the nearby cafe. She smiled faintly. It was simple, but meaningful. She walked to the elevator, her steps quiet yet purposeful. Outside, the city buzzed with people rushing to work. Maya followed the instructions on the note and approached a bench where an elderly man was sitting alone. His eyes were tired, his coat thin, and his hands clasped together. He looked at her with mild curiosity. "Excuse me," Maya said softly. "Would you like to have lunch?" She handed him one of the vouchers. The man looked at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" Maya smiled. "Yes. Please enjoy it." He nodded, a faint smile forming on his face. "Thank you, young lady. That is very kind of you." Maya watched as he went into the cafe. She waited, observing the people around her. Some walked past without noticing her or the man. Others offered polite glances but did not stop. Maya reflected on how small acts of kindness could have a ripple effect, quietly changing someone's day. When the man returned, he carried the lunch carefully. You have a good heart, he said, looking at her. Not many people would do this. Maya felt warmth in her chest. I only do what I can, she said softly. She returned to the office, her steps lighter than before. The experience had reminded her of yesterday's encounter, the stranger she had fed with her last dollar. And now, for the first time, she realized how meaningful small gestures could be in the world. Daniel was waiting when she arrived. He looked at her expectantly. How did it go? He asked. Maya recounted her experience with honesty, describing the man's reaction and how she had felt helping him. Daniel listened carefully, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. You see, Maya, he said, most people think a job is only about tasks and results. But life and business is about people. Understanding them, helping them, and showing empathy, that is how we build a strong foundation. Today, you demonstrated what I wanted to see. Your actions spoke louder than any answer you could have given in an interview. Maya felt a swell of pride and relief. She realized that her small act, simple as it seemed, had been noticed in a deeper way. Daniel smiled gently. You have the potential to grow here, not only in your career but also as a person who inspires others. That is why I wanted to see you in action today. Maya nodded, her eyes bright. Thank you, sir. I promise I will do my best. Daniel returned her nod with a reassuring smile. I know you will. Welcome to the company, Maya. Your journey begins today, but it is only the beginning of the story you are creating for yourself. Maya left his office with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. Every step in the hallways, every smile from her new colleagues, reminded her that kindness, honesty, and courage could open doors that once seemed impossible. As she settled into her new role, Maya realized something important: the greatest challenges in life were not always about work or money. They were about choices: choosing to help, choosing to act with integrity, and choosing to trust the power of small acts. And for Maya, that lesson had begun not with a job or a paycheck, but with a simple sandwich and her last dollar. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the company's office, bathing the rooms in warm light. Maya arrived early, just as she had promised herself, her heart steady but full of excitement. She had spent the past few days settling into her role, learning names, understanding the routines, and quietly observing how the company functioned. Every corner she turned, every task she completed, reminded her that she was finally stepping into a life she had only dreamed about. Today, however, felt different. There was a quiet anticipation in the air, and Maya could sense it the moment she entered the building. The receptionist smiled at her knowingly, and colleagues greeted her with a little more warmth than usual. Something was about to happen. She followed the familiar path to Daniel's office, her folder clutched gently in her hands. He was already standing by the window when she arrived, gazing at the city below. He turned as she entered and smiled. Good morning, Maya, he said. How is your first week going? Maya returned his smile. It's been wonderful. I'm learning a lot, and everyone has been very helpful. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. That's good to hear. But today, I want to do something different. Maya tilted her head, curious. Different how? He gestured for her to sit. I want you to understand something important about why you are here. Your journey began long before you walked into this building. Yesterday's lunch, your honesty in the interview, and your small acts of kindness, they all led to this moment. Today, I want to show you how your choices have power beyond what you imagine. Maya's eyes widened slightly. She had not expected this. She had only hoped to do her best, to show that she could work hard and learn quickly. She had never imagined that her past actions could be so meaningful in someone else's eyes. Daniel smiled faintly. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Maya blinked, remembering the street, the bench, the empty sandwich wrapper. "Yes," she said softly. "I remember." He leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. "At that moment, you chose kindness even when you had nothing left to give. You did not expect recognition, reward, or gratitude. You acted because it was the right thing to do. That choice, your choice, showed me a part of life that many people forget in the rush to succeed." Maya felt her throat tighten. She had never thought of it that way. She had only acted out of instinct, out of a sense of compassion she could not ignore. Daniel continued, "When you came into the interview, I recognized that same spirit. And today, I want to give you more than a job. I want to give you a chance to grow, to lead, and to make a difference for others, just as you made a difference for me." Maya's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly blinked them away. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," Daniel said kindly. "Just continue being yourself. That is all anyone will ever need." Later that day, Maya walked through the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Colleagues greeted her with smiles, and she noticed subtle changes in the way they responded to her respect, interest, and even curiosity. She realized that her actions, both big and small, were making ripples. At lunchtime, she sat near the same park she had passed a few days ago. She watched people walking by, children laughing, and street vendors selling fresh fruit. Her mind wandered to the man she had helped with her last dollar. She hoped he was well, and she smiled quietly, knowing that even small gestures could carry hope to someone's heart. As she returned to the office, Daniel called her into his office once more. "Maya," he said, "I want you to lead a small project. Nothing too complicated at first, but it will give you a chance to show initiative and creativity. I want you to handle it in your own way, with honesty and integrity." Maya nodded, feeling a warmth she had never known before. "I will do my best," she said. "I know you will," Daniel replied. "And remember, it's not just about results. It's about the way you make people feel along the way. That is what true leadership is." As she walked back to her desk, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the hunger she had felt yesterday, to the nervous steps she had taken in the interview room, every choice, every small act of courage, had led her to this moment. She realized that life had a way of returning kindness, even when it seemed impossible. The day ended with Maya completing her tasks and reporting to Daniel. He smiled at her, and for the first time, she felt that she was truly seen, not just for what she could do, but for who she was. That evening, as she walked home under the golden glow of the sunset, Maya felt lighter than she had in years. She knew there would still be challenges, days when life felt difficult, and moments of uncertainty. But now she understood something vital: true strength came from kindness, courage, and staying true to oneself, even in the hardest moments. She paused near a quiet street, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. The city hummed around her, full of stories she had yet to hear. And for the first time, Maya felt ready not just to survive, but to live, to grow, and to make a difference. Her journey had begun with a single sandwich and her last dollar. And now, as she walked forward, Maya knew that every small act of kindness, every brave choice, would continue to open doors, not just for her, but for everyone she touched along the way. Life had changed, and she was ready to embrace it fully.